Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is a tea called Starry Night Tea. I think it's called Starry Night Tea. Anyway, which is after the Vincent van Gogh painting. I got it from the Chicago Tea House, and it is a nice blend of black and green tea, and I think marigold and rose petals, maybe something else. But I thought it would be mildly fitting because I am talking at least a little bit about painting, and not the same genre, whatever you want to call it, but not a very far off time period. And this has rose petals, so I thought Rossetti might feature into this conversation. It's a bit of a stretch, but why not? Anyway, it's a nice tea. It's very tasty, and so why not? Excuse my nose once again, making all these sad, stuffy noises. Um, so I thought I would do my last wrap up of 2023 in terms of just what I was reading recently. I might do a favorites of the year or something coming up, but I just wanted to talk about the few books that I finished in December 2023 after the last video I made about tea and mystery. So, and there was a mystery book in this grouping, but I just thought it's not really themed for mystery this time, but that's okay. I think it's okay. So, in no order, really, I will start with probably my least favorite of these reads, and it's not a bad book, especially because this author is I don't know. I struggle with this guy. And this is Thomas Hardy, and this was Under the Greenwood Tree. So it was just like this village or area, rural area, I guess, and I don't know what to say. It seemed to be around, at least the beginning of the plot takes place around the Christmas holidays, so there's carolers and all that. So I guess that's why the group that I was reading with suggested it for this time, maybe, I guess. But I read it just because I wanted to read another Thomas Hardy and give him another chance. It wasn't terrible. It didn't hold my interest in a way that I would have liked for it to have. There's a number of different types of quirky characters in there, and then there's a love story that develops between this man and woman. And there are some things in the way. There is other suitors in the way, and the position of the man in question and the woman and her family, and how just different things. I don't want to give away the entire plot. It's definitely nowhere near as tragic as some of Thomas Hardy's stories, and it has a couple of laughs and pleasant moments. It's a little bit cozy if you want to take your time with it, and it's not a long book. So, you see, yeah, you could read it pretty quickly if you just want to read a Thomas Hardy book that's not very long. I just didn't feel the resolution didn't make me very happy. It was this feeling of bleakness that I don't know if it was intended, but I just felt not satisfied the way I would have liked. It didn't, everybody said, oh, this is one of the more positive and, less depressing of Thomas Hardy's novels. Of course it was. But I have read other ones that were good and had happier endings and were not, and that were better than this one. So not a hate, but not an absolute thrill. And the sad thing is I don't know if you probably can't see it now because it's below. Anyway, and I'm not going to turn the camera around, but I have a pretty decent collection of these orange spine penguins, and the only other one I read that I can remember this year was The Fixed Period by Anthony Trollope. So now we're 0 for 2, and like I said, not terrible, but again, not one of my favorites, and again, that Trollope was definitely not one of my favorite Trollopes, so I'm hoping to read another one of these editions so that I can feel some sort of redemption from this grouping. Maybe it's just a coincidence that I got bad ones. So if you've ever read any of Thomas Hardy's books, but especially this one, please let me know if you agree with me. I know I didn't get very specific in why and what, because I didn't want to give away the plot. I just felt it had its moments, and sometimes moments that were pretty funny, but just, I don't know. I just didn't feel very hopeful about the particular relationship in question. And I'm not that into things having to be perfect, but Okay, that was a long interval right there. Okay, so the next one is the one that I was speaking of in terms of painting and everything. This is a book called Stunner, The Fall and Rise of Fanny Cornforth by Christy Stonell Walker. Right there. And there she is, Fanny Cornforth, which wasn't her birth name. I can't remember now because there's so many people in this book that she comes into contact with. I can't remember if this was a married name or a name she just took on. But I've been into the Pre-Raphaelite situation, the artists and the models, the muses as they call them sometimes, for a while, and I've read quite a few nonfiction and sort of biographical fiction works about both the painters and the women, and women came from different walks of life, and of course this one I picked up because I thought, well, I'm going to, literally this is because I was going to the Rossetti exhibition in the Delaware Museum of Art. I've been meaning to get to the Delaware Museum of Art for over a decade because they in the United States, it's not easy to find a Pre-Raphaelite an abundance of Pre-Raphaelite art. It's not impossible, but it's not a specialty of a lot of the museums. And I'm one of my favorites in my area, of course, is the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's huge. It's very well known. There's a couple of paintings, tops, and often when you do find some, they're on loan. And so there, if you love Impressionism, it's Van Gogh, you definitely will enjoy them at museum. But, so in order for me to see these paintings, I usually have seen them when I've gone to London. But who can go to London all the time? At least I can't. But so I found out about the Rossetti exhibition. I don't know why I keep saying that. Months ago when it was in London, and I said, "Oh, that's nice. I'm not going to make it." And then I heard it was going to be in the Delaware Museum, and said, "All right, I can find a way to get down there, can't I? I mean, what is wrong with me? How have I never gotten down to the Delaware Museum?" It's in Wilmington, which is not a super long Amtrak trip. This is what I took. I do not drive. So I took a day off of work, and I think it was my last day off that I had. One of the last days off I had, my vacation days. And I planned a day trip. It was cold out, but it was good because I met up with my friend who is one of my friends that I have traveled with a lot, and I visited her. She now lives near the DC area. So for her, it was easy enough for her to take the train and meet up with me in Wilmington. My first time in that area. I passed through on the way to DC, Wilmington, but this was a first. So, and it was really nice because my friend actually ended up, when we got there, renting a car so we wouldn't have to be Ubering everywhere. And it was a cold day. It had been a little bit snowflakey, so it was a good day to be in a warm place. Anyway, I know you're probably like, why are you rambling about this? Because it was a wonderful visit. I saw the paintings I want, and I saw some American paintings that I wasn't aware of, almost to the point that I almost preferred that section to the Pre-Raphaelites. Almost. I will say Rossetti is not my favorite in terms of as a person. Some of his paintings I like quite a lot. His story is extremely interesting, and anyone he's come in contact with was very interesting. And thankfully it didn't just feature him; it featured his sister Christina, who was a poet, and William, I think, is his brother, who I believe was a writer and other things. So I think he outlived them both. Was it him? I think it was he who outlived them both. Anyway, so, and it wasn't just them, it was also who was married to Dante Gabriel Rossetti, and that was Elizabeth Siddal. So she did some work too, not just modeling. Sorry about the radiator, by the way, it's very loud today. It's like in the summer when it's air conditioning. But she was, in her own right, she had learned how to draw and paint, and so that was nice that she was included. And she was a tragic story. If you've ever seen Millet, he was one of the Pre-Raphaelite paintings. His painting of Ophelia, which is a very famous one, you will see what she looked like. That was not in this museum that which I didn't expect it to be, but I was a little like, I want to see it. But one of Rossetti's famous models was, yes, that's right, Fanny Cornforth. She was one of the ones that had one of the least positive reputations, I guess, because she was rumored to be like a prostitute, and you know how people are, when, especially in the Victorian era, it was like you knew a lot of people did have dealings, especially in the art world, with prostitutes, but you know, you also had to be under the veneer of, we would never, oh, never, you know, oh, that's so wrong. It was almost hypocritical, really. But she was also someone who became, you know, a lover or whatever you want to call it of Rossetti, and competition for others, including his wife, and she outlived most of them. No one really knows exactly when she died, which is weird. There was a lot of information that was missing, actually, maybe because it's just permanently missing. It still bothers me somehow that these things weren't always in public record. But I selected this book to start reading on the train ride, the Amtrak train ride down to Wilmington, which is over 2 hours, and it was a nice ride, by the way, in case you were wondering. But so it turned out it was a good idea to read this book on the way, because she had dealings with a certain person whose name is not coming to me. I believe it was Bancroft was his last name. Maybe Samuel Bancroft? Anyway, see what happens when you finish things a couple weeks ago and you forget names altogether. Well, at least that happens to me. Anyway, and he was one of these wealthy art collectors. There's a number of them, obviously, who had an interest in Pre-Raphaelite paintings, and she was able to provide him with some of these works, and, you know, for her own benefit, really, later on in her life, and after Rossetti had already passed. And so, you know, it was I didn't think about that because I didn't really know a lot about her life, so I didn't realize that connection, because his Bancroft, I believe that's his name, his acquisitions, his paintings are the ones that are one of the foundations of this Delaware museum. So there was a major connection. I just thought, okay, she's connected to Rossetti, so that works. It was really connected, but she wasn't entirely put in a positive light in this story because, well, if you are ever the other woman, and she had also been married to one or two, not at the same time, but, you know, to some men while she had dealings with Rossetti, sometimes just as model, but, you know, probably other things as well. But I enjoyed it because it was a bit of a story of survival, because growing up she had family. Most of them died young, sick, and in not great circumstances financially. And it looks like she became, at some point, a maid, you know, in a wealthy person's house, and had to deal with the things that women of that time had to deal with. Sometimes having certain relationships with the people in the house, and it was always a shaky situation. So in a way, I liked her story of survival. The writer, Christy Stonewall Walker, she's written a number of Pre-Raphaelite related items, and I think she also has a blog. Not my favorite of the writers, but also has her moments. And she seemed to attribute the fact that later on, especially later on, but even during, Fanny Cornforth was one of the less, shall we say, thin of the models, you know, slightly considered overweight. And part of that might have been her need to stay, you know, fed or whatever. Like that was her explanation, that maybe she equated not having enough to eat and being thin with something negative, so she maybe tried to eat enough and to take what she needed to survive. Now, I don't know if that's exactly the right explanation, but I wouldn't call Fanny Cornforth my hero, but I have over the years occasionally had a mild struggle with, you know, weight, and I liked the fact that there was one that wasn't super thin. And I don't know, it just sounded like, okay, someone I can almost relate to, you know, that wasn't Rubenesque, you know. So I like the story. There were a lot of bits that there's just not enough information on, and sometimes it jumped a little bit from time to time, and so it wasn't always the most coherent biography I've ever read. But I think if you are someone who is at all interested, and I know not everybody is, in the whole Pre-Raphaelite story, and if you want to read as much as possible about it, this might be one to read. I wouldn't say it should be your first. There's a number of books that are better. There's one, and the name of the author is not coming to me right now, but the title is Reading the Pre-Raphaelites, and it is really good because, and I read it, I believe, was it last year or the year before? It was mainly studying the actual paintings and not getting into the whole gossip of all the relationships. Now, I also enjoy, I hate to say enjoy gossip, but I, I enjoy reading about the relationships between the Pre-Raphaelite, the painters themselves and their friendships and their rivalries, and the women and other people in their life that they had relationships with. It just makes for good storytelling, really. I mean, I know a lot of people probably dealt with some terrible things, drug addiction and early deaths and, miscarriages and stuff. Some sad moments, really. And, obviously treachery, people cheating on each other, etc., was always a sad thing. But if you wanted to get into the actual art history, I would say reading the Pre-Raphaelites is a really good idea. I know I have it also right behind me somewhere. Anyway, one of these days I'll actually move my camera around and show you all my books, but stay tuned, right? Okay, so moving on from that subject and going on to the last one that I read, and it's a mystery, and my hat is over there and I'm not reaching for it. This is the next book in the Her Majesty the Queen Investigates series by S.J. Bennett. This is called Murder Most Royal. There it is. Oh, there it is. There. Glare. The glare. It takes place, obviously this is fiction, but it takes place when the Queen and her family, well, not the current Queen anymore, but the Queen at the time, Queen Elizabeth II, was spending her holidays at the end of 2016 and then going into 2017. I think it ends up through January and maybe about to be February of 2017. So that was an interesting year for, well, the world. They talked about the presidential election that had just happened in 2016 a little bit. And of course, Brexit. That was a huge deal in Britain. So in the start of the story, the Queen and her husband, Prince Philip, both are dealing with a cold, or maybe something worse than a cold, but a bug that's really bothering them. But they're still going to go to Sandringham, which is where they went for that time period. They used to, I think probably the family still does, but now obviously this particular couple doesn't because they're not alive anymore. But yeah. Anyway, there's something sad about that now, But in the beginning when I read this series, it was like, she was still around, but I guess we'll all get used to it at some point. But so she's, so in the beginning she's dealing with not feeling totally great, but it turns out that her, in some nearby, I believe, body of water or something, forgetting the exact thing, a girl who lives nearby finds a hand. Finds a hand. And, and then the Queen actually figures out who it belongs to, and it ends up there is someone who is missing, who has had, who the royal family has known over the years. This particular family, obviously, it's probably fictionalized. The name looks like Saint Cyr, Stcyr, but it's pronounced Sincere, which I actually have sometimes trouble reconciling that pronunciation because I don't know. I want to say Saint. I don't like say like St. John instead of St. John. I don't know. I don't get it, but that's okay. That is actually discussed in this book too, briefly. And with the help of her assistant, whatever they call it, there's her main private secretary and then her assistant, Rosie, who has some army training, and they always mention she's quite tall, and she's just very helpful with the Queen. They help mostly behind the scenes to figure out what happened and who done it and what the whole situation is. I think the Queen takes almost more of an active part in this story than she has before, because there are certain times where she really throws herself in and goes visiting people and asking all kinds of questions. I guess in the sense that she can, because she would probably visit certain families that they were close to in the area. I don't know everything about these Sandringham visits or any other times, that when they are away from Buckingham Palace. But I'm sure they've had some social contacts that they keep in touch with. So, and they will maybe have, lunch together, dinners or teas or whatever. So it was kind of, again, it's not really Miss Marple, but it does have that feeling of this, older woman that you wouldn't expect to know as much as they do about certain situations, and they're able to investigate behind the scenes. And most of the royal family is featured in here as well. There's times where Princess Anne and, at the time, Prince Charles were discussing how the Queen is feeling and everything, and they try to find out some more information. Some of the Queen's grandchildren have certain discussions, and certain gifts that she gets gives her certain ideas for investigation. So it's a fun way of looking at the royal family without making them seem perfect in any possible way, but seeming almost like your regular family that just happens to have a lot of privilege spending time together. So it ends up being a bit of a cozy mystery, even taking out the whole, dismembered corpse situation. I enjoyed it. I think it's a steady 4-star mystery read so far. I think most of these stories so far have been that way. Looking forward, I guess, to the next one. I don't know how far they can go with now a 90-year-old person who doesn't have much longer to go. I don't know what she'll do. I don't like to give advice to writers, but I sort of, because they made certain references to the past, I wonder if the writer will go back to maybe the 50s, 60s, whatever, and drum up a few other mysteries, because then it becomes historical mystery, and that is enjoyable too. So I enjoy this reading. I like the combination, even though I wasn't thrilled with Thomas Hardy. I still like the combination of books that I had. I had a classic, I had a biography that went along with my interest, and a mystery. I feel like that was well-rounded, plus the couple of books that I read earlier in December ended up being a pretty busy reading month for me, especially compared to the previous one. So I was happy to finish up my year like that. And so let me know what you thought of these books, if you've read any of them, if you'd like to read any of them, if you've read anything similar. And hopefully I'll be back soon talking about books that I read that favorites or whatever. I'm really hoping to get there. So that is all for now. This is Catherine, taking tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and book-filled day.